our intellectual property. Thank you. Our intellectual property is really one of our most incredibly valuable assets because it's one of the things that we get to take with us, which is one of the very few things that we get to take amongst our experiences. So Paula asked me to come in here to share with you guys a little bit about the things that I have an understanding on around what it is that creates how it is that we think. And I know when you're developing a character, we really have a lot of understanding when it comes to male-female dynamics and how trauma and upbringing and society can play a role in who it is that we become, and cultural beliefs and where it is that we grew up can absolutely play a role. There's a whole other underlying world that I learned about when I became a hypnotherapist, which is where I spend a significant amount of my time and where I educate my clients first and foremost so that they understand there's this whole other dynamic that is very much unspoken unless you are a hypnotherapist or you have the pleasure of working with one that educates you about what it is that they understand that helps them to effectively help you to update your own mental operating system, which, just so you know, is very much like a phone. And once you learn how to work with it, it can actually be a lot of fun working with your mind and updating your programs. So when we're little, we really are blank slate. We come into the world with the soul that we have and the personality that we come into the world with. Just so you guys know, I am a very spiritual person. So I very much do believe that we come into this world with a soul and a personality, and that does have its own blueprint and influence on how it is that we express ourselves in this life. However, we do come blank slate in the fact that we do choose to forget our previous self and have a whole new world of experiences, because in this life, I believe that we are here to hurt to learn, right? And this helps us to expand into something that we couldn't have if we knew our power. So in the first fundamental years of our life, it would be birth to age 9. Our mother or mother figure is the one who influences or imprints how our operating system works. So all of the information that is coming in and how we learn how to receive that information is dictated by that relationship. So our mother, when she says, if you don't clean your room, you're not going to have TV tonight, and you don't clean your room, and then she turns the TV off and you have no more TV for the rest of the night, it teaches you how to receive things literally. So then you start to, as a result of trauma, authority, and repetition, the trauma of no TV, your mom being an authority and repetitively doing that, it actually programs you to receive everything literally. Okay. Now, if she was to do exactly the opposite as you're growing up, and she says, if you don't clean your room, you get no TV, and then she actually doesn't give you dessert after dinner instead, but she lets you watch TV, then you start to infer and you start to go, hold on a second. So when she says, I don't get TV, it actually means I don't get dessert. So you learn how to start to infer that obviously mommy means something other than what she actually says. And through the authority trauma and repetition, trauma of no dessert, we learn that everything actually needs to be received through inference. So we learn to infer whatever it is that anybody says. It's got to mean something else, okay? Now, in the years of 9 to like 15, the relationship that we have with our father or father figure, obviously there's all different expressions of relationships, the relationship that we have with him actually dictates our mental operating system in regards to how we output information. So if he was really present during those years and he was really affectionate and he showed up to all of your extracurriculars and he was there to cheer you on and he gave you lots of verbal praise and he gave you lots of physical affection, he was really huggy and lovey and affectionate with you, then you would actually become somebody who outputs very affectionately. You would be very outgoing. You would be very sexual, sensual, showy. You might be the kind of a person that loves lots of makeup and sparkles and glitter, and you show up into the center of the party and you go, the party can start because I'm here. So you end up becoming significantly more expressive. You want to be the center of conversations, and you want to converse with as many people as you possibly can in a space when you're in it. So significantly more outgoing. Whereas if your father was quite the opposite and he wasn't present in your life very much, and he was more of a ghost of a father, and he didn't express his love for you, and he wasn't very physically affectionate, then your output is going to be much the same. It's actually going to be a lot more elusive. If you go to a party, you're going to be much happier to sit on a couch and connect with one person. And if you had one good connection in the periphery of the party, you're going to be much happier with that than trying to connect with everyone. You're much happier wearing clothing that doesn't get you noticed, stuff that's a little bit more balanced. You might not put on showy makeup if you wear makeup at all, if you're female. You might be a lot more chill. You're not necessarily going to wear heels. You might go with flats because those are actually more comfortable. You don't really care whether anybody knows that you even showed up to the party or not. You don't need to be seen or known in the scenario. You're more of a wallflower. Now, what this creates is suggestibility and sexuality. So what I was describing in the relationship with their mother and the way that you are raised and programmed to input information is called suggestibility. Your sexuality or your output is dictated by the relationship with the father, okay? So this is not male or female inherently. In fact, you get physical or emotional in both. So there is a scale essentially that dictates suggestibility and sexuality. So it's going to be 50% on right in the center, and then you're going to get 50 to 100% on the physical side and 50 to 100% on the emotional side. Now, I want you to understand that you can be right in the center. You can be 50% in between physical and emotional. And if you are in the center, you would be what they would call a somnambulist. And a somnambulist is somebody that is actually significantly more suggestible. And somnambulists, what they tend to do is actually play the opposite or become the opposite of the person that they're with. So if they're dating someone or in a relationship with someone who is a high fizz and they're very outward and they're very loud and they love being the center of the party, they're actually going to naturally balance that by becoming the opposite. Whereas if they're with an emo that's a lot less expressive and more introverted, they're going to then balance that by becoming more outgoing. And all of this is happening on a subconscious level. We don't think about it at all because it is our operating system that was programmed from the time that we were really young. Okay. Now, here's another really, really interesting factor is that we naturally attract our opposite. It's a subconscious program, and it's also there because it actually supports us balancing ourselves and evolving and expanding. Because when we're with someone that is our balancer or our opposite, it helps us to actually kind of meet each other more in the middle and pull each other towards more balance, right? So let me describe, if you think about this, the different priority lists of somebody who is a physical versus somebody who is an emotional. And you can think about where it is that you would fit into this. So a fizz, their number one priority is actually relationships. So loving relationships, romance, and sex. And in fact, they're one and the same. They're not separate. A physical actually needs the physical affection or needs to make love to their partner to feel in love with their partner. And they have an insanely high sex drive. They're pretty much insatiable and they want it all the time. The fizz is the one who usually gets sexually frustrated and strays in the relationship. Then next, it's family, then it's hobbies, then it's career. Okay. Now with an emo, what's really interesting is it's actually the reverse. So with an emo, their number one priority is actually career. And then it's hobbies, and then it's sex, and then it's love. Now, have you noticed that it's not one and the same? So for a fizz, they have sex and love as one, and they're number one. For an emo, sex and love are separate. So emos are actually able to make love without the emotion. They don't need to feel emotion for somebody to have a physical connection with them at all. They can just in and out. Fizzes, however, are the ones that are going to tell you, I need to feel an emotional connection with somebody to be able to do that. I just can't I just can't do this casual stuff. It just doesn't work for me. Now, with a fizz, if you want to turn them on, don't worry about it. They're already on. They're always on. That's kind of how they work, right? The fizz is the one who's complaining, going, we're not having enough fun together. We're not connecting enough. We need to connect more. We need to have more fun together, because they need that physical connection to feel the love. Whereas the emo, they pretty much seem to feel indifferent as to how often
they can't see or hear you.
Who can't see or hear me?
Didn't think good.
Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, sorry. I thought my audio was off.
Oh, I just want to make sure you guys are hearing me okay. So the emo, what's really interesting about the emo is they're completely indifferent as to how often it is that you connect, because once they actually form an emotional connection with you, the emotional connection doesn't ebb and flow with how often you guys connect with each other. So they're quite happy to be in a relationship with you and to have quality time with you, but how often you connect isn't something that they're necessarily going to complain about. And it doesn't seem to really bother them. And the fizz is always going, does it bother you that we're going this long in between? And they're like, no. And they're like, I don't understand how this isn't driving you nuts. And for some reason, it's just really not, right? Now, here's another dynamic, is the physical is very connected to their emotions. So when I say physical, I'm saying that they are actually very physical, and they need the physical to be more emotionally connected. Does that make sense? Now, if you think about emotional, most people think an emotional is an emotional train wreck. They're really emotional. They're all in their emotions. It's actually exactly the opposite. I tend to call an emotional cripple, because they're actually not connected to their emotions. They're a lot more logical. They're a lot more intellectual. They're a lot more trusting in the things that they can touch. And they don't need the physical to actually feel the emotional connection. In fact, the two are separate. So the physical is naturally more drawn to want to do the work. They're a lot more drawn to want to evolve and expand. The physical is the one that needs to analyze the hell out of everything to make sense of what went wrong in the relationship. And they need to talk it out, and they need to process it, and they need to get resolution so that they feel like they've expanded into a new space where the problem that arose isn't going to happen again. Right? Whereas the emo is like, that happened 5 minutes ago. Can we just move on, please? Why are you trying to beat a dead horse? I don't understand why we have to keep talking about this. Does this sound familiar to you guys? So this can be.
It sounds to me as if we're attracting our opposite, that we're setting ourselves up for conflict.
That's really interesting that you say that, because we absolutely, believe it or not, we are calling in somebody who is going to create conflict for us. And the reason for that is because our subconscious mind, knowing that we have programs that need to be updated, we have trauma that we're carrying, we have expanding that we need to do in this life. We are naturally called to somebody who not only is our opposite, but actually is a match for our programming. And the reason for that is because they are meant to be what I like to call our perfect button pusher. So this person is going to come in and they are going to push those trauma buttons. They're going to trigger those programs. They are going to create conflict. And what it does is it then surfaces emotion for you to be able to then look at what is going on and what needs to be expanded on, what needs to be healed, what programs need to be updated. So our partner is absolutely perfect the way that it is. Because of societal teachings, we generally tend to look at that conflict and go, that person's a douchebag. But that's actually not what's going on. The person is actually being perfect the way that they are. And they're doing exactly what you subconsciously asked them to do. Consciously, we dream of a perfect romance that has no conflict, right? And it's all just lovemaking all the time and having beautiful meals together and going for walks on the beach, and everything is so beautiful and perfect. And we have the same opinions on everything, and we're equally expanded, and we have the same awareness, and everything is just beautiful and flows perfectly. And it just never works out that way, does it? Never.
That's also a very boring book to read.
That would be so boring, right? Because if there's no conflict, it's not going to be any fun, which is why every storyline that has ever been written in the human history is just there's conflict, right? Because it's fun, because people evolve. Mm-hmm. So here's something that's really interesting as well. That's the difference between the fizz and the emos I was talking about, with the emo naturally being pulled to be introspective and being more emotionally intelligent and wanting to do the work and naturally wanting to process. Guess what the fizz is? Significantly more expanded, right? They have a super highway when it comes to their emotional intelligence, right? They're reading the personal development books and they're always looking to resolve conflict within themselves. And how do I not have this happen again? And, they're going to the seminars and they're doing all of this great work. And they're like, I want to date somebody that's as aware and evolved as me. And what happens? You date someone that is just not even remotely what you asked for, because they're your opposite and they're your balancer. Now your opposite is actually somebody who isn't called to do the work as much. And they might be somebody who's on the path, but I'm telling you right now, they're not on it as hard as you are. They are definitely not on it as maximum effort as you are. They're going to be significantly less introspective. They're going to have a dirt road for an emotional intelligence highway. They're not going to want to discuss things to the depth that you do. In fact, they just don't really like analyzing much of anything unless it's their business and their financials. Okay. So if you are a fizz, you are a Bugatti Veyron. You are a Ferrari. You are a Lamborghini. You are a sports car when it comes to your emotional intelligence and your expansion. Okay. So you go significantly faster, right? The emo would be what would be considered to be a dune buggy. Okay. So the dune buggy is plugging along and is really enjoying the ride and really has no F's to give. And they're really chilling and everything is totally chill and fine until the fizz comes to them and tells them that there's something wrong. And they don't even understand why there is, because as far as they're concerned, everything was just fine. Right. So, and they force the conversation and the expansion. Now, this is a beautiful dynamic because the fizz sees everything expanding all the time. And the fizz or the emo gets the physical to stop analyzing the F out of everything, because I'm a fizz. Fizzes tend to overanalyze and we tend to get something that's called analysis paralysis. And I'm just going to tell you, my emo partner talks me out of that and calms me down. And he's really good for that, right? Because the emo is the one going, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. It's not your job to worry about the house. Stop trying to figure this out. Stop trying to map it out. Stop trying to plan it out. It's going to work out, right? So they help to balance us out. Now, when we understand these dynamics and we understand that there's always going to be a fizz in a relationship, in a romantic dynamic, and there's going to be an emo, or there's going to be a somnambulist who has balanced the fizz or the emo and is playing the opposite dynamic, it means that it's not just men that are horn dogs, because in society, it is acceptable for the man to be the one who wants to have sex and is aggressive in that way. And generally, they're the ones who are perceived to be the one who is going out because they're so hungry that they need to go and stray and they need to have extracurriculars and they betray and they do all the rest of that, right? And the female is not really supposed to want it as much. However, females can be fizzes too, and female fizzes want it just as much as male fizzes do. And female fizzes absolutely go out and have extracurriculars as well if they're denied and they're not allowed to have fun, right? So when you understand that the dynamics are male and female, and they're also very much dictated by our operating systems and how they function, it creates a completely different dynamic. Think about when you're creating a character. If you're creating a character that receives everything literally all the time, how are you going to develop that character? If you're developing a character that's an emo and they receive everything through inference, well, you know that every time that somebody says something to them, in their mind, when they're processing it, they're inferring that it means something else, right? And then there's a whole other dynamic as well, that we create our reality as a result of our programming. So if you think about all of the experiences that you've had, spiders are scary, snakes are terrifying. I like snakes, but a lot of people don't like snakes. Ice cream is yummy, chocolate is yummy, sunny days are beautiful, rainy days super suck, but some people love rainy days. You never know, right? I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. We create all of these programs throughout our lives. If we have traumatic experiences with the opposite sex, we can be telling ourselves that the opposite sex isn't safe or the world's not safe. And that running program is going to dictate everything that you do, because your subconscious mind is actually your best friend. It is your advocate. It is your support. It is there to help you survive in a way that you don't have to think about it, because you know fire is hot, so you don't go putting your hand on the stove, right? Or you don't go walking into a campfire. You know that heights are dangerous. You have an autonomic fear of heights, so you're not going to go walking off the edge of a cliff. You know that cars are lethal weapons, so you're not going to go walking into the middle of the street accidentally and get hit by a car. A lot of the programs that are created as we're growing up are very supportive and help keep us alive. However, when we're a child and we experience, say, sexual trauma, or we experience abandonment, this can create programs that dictate our behavior for the rest of our lives. So think about this when you're actually developing a character, right? If you have a character that has abandonment issues, this can actually present two ways. It's either going to present like they strangle the crap out of everybody they get involved with, right? Everyone gets suffocated because they're terrified of losing everyone, or they become an armadillo human and they don't let anyone close, because they don't let anyone get close enough that they can be abandoned in the first place. It's just never going to be a factor because I'm never going to let anyone in. Right? And if you don't understand programming, you're going to see those two types of behavior, and they're going to be presenting very differently. And someone might think that it's a completely different program, but it's actually exactly the same abandonment program that has created different survival mechanisms, and they play out very differently. So if you think about the different trauma and how this can play out, you'll understand essentially how to then develop your character in such a way that they're going to be significantly more multifaceted because of these different programs. So when you're writing things out, you can go, okay, so if my person had sexual trauma, but they had sexual trauma with the same sex because it was babysitters, say, and it was a girl and it was a female babysitter that traumatized them, what kind of program is that created? And we know that that's potentially actually going to create issue in relationships with females and friendships and stuff like that moving forward. And in fact, it could actually turn into the person maybe becoming bi and expressing themselves and having sexual dysfunction in that way because of that, because it being woken up by a female and the programs that are created there, right? So it creates some phenomenal dynamics when you understand this to the level that you can play with this to really understand input and output and programming. Now, to your guys' support, I'm actually going to be sharing a link with you guys so you can go and do this suggestibility testing so that you can actually find out whether you're a fizz or an emo and what percentages you are. And there's about 4 hours worth of video content that you're going to have access to as well that you can take your time digesting so that you can truly understand the characteristics of a fizz versus the characteristics of an emo, so that it'll really, really help you in your character development and really next level the game for you guys.
So I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
So going back to what you were saying about the person who, say the abandonment issue, where it could present in two ways. One as a very standoffish person, I'm not going to let anybody close, or as a person of I want to glom on to everybody and hold them really tight emotionally. Yeah. So yes, abandonment can express in either of those two ways. Does it express in one way for a physical person versus the other way for the emotional person?
That's really fascinating because I have actually for sure seen fizzes that become armadillo humans and fizzes that actually suffocate as well. So it expresses both ways from what I've seen in both suggestibilities. It's just what it is that the person at the time when they're in their youth, because, oh, this is another factor that I just want to let you guys know, because this is actually going to really support you for character development. Suggestibility isn't solidified till you're 25. Okay. So what a person is presenting when it comes to their characteristics and everything that they're expressing up until they're about that age is fluid. You don't know where they're going to go and what they're going to be. And because suggestibility isn't dictated and solidified until that age, the programs that we create and how we create our survival mechanisms or programs isn't dictated by suggestibility. Does that make sense?
Please clarify that a little bit.
Okay, so our input and output isn't solidified until we're 25 years old. Okay, so that not being solidified until we're 25, how we choose to survive or what we choose as survival mechanisms in our childhood from our experiences isn't dictated by our input and output.
Okay.
So at the time, it's just if we have an abandonment issue that happens at 3 years old, we are going to just tell ourselves at that 3-year-old age, it's better to keep people at a distance. Or maybe if I just hold on to everyone, they'll stay with me. If I just control them and hold on to them, I can get them to stay with me. It's not really a suggestibility thing.
So we have some authors here who write contemporary and some like me who write historical. Obviously, dynamics are huge in the difference between them. Mainly in my mind is that historically people married much younger, females anyway, and perhaps males. I'm not too sure if males really married much younger than they do today. But today, I think there's especially in romance writing, when we take a look at the heroine for contemporary, they're usually older than what they would be in historical writing. So what you were just saying about some of this not solidifying until age 25 for historical writers, it sounds to me as if the people, the heroine especially, would still be of a very fluid nature, emotionally or psychologically, than perhaps a heroine today who might be in their late 20s or early 30s.
Yes, in fact, obviously, if you're looking at historical stuff, some of the girls were married off, shortly after hitting puberty. And so they would actually very much still be suggestible, and there would be dynamics that would actually contribute to how they end up expressing themselves, because that person they marry would end up almost playing that father figure role and influencing them and how they end up developing. Absolutely. So that's really, really interesting to actually think about and play out, and how that would actually, influence how they end up developing as a person, having a father figure at one point of their development, but then having that father figure then turn into their husband and influencing them. Say if they got married at like 12 or 13, when they're still in that space where they're developing their sexuality or their output. Okay. Sorry, scratch in my throat.
That's all right.
The other thing that is a massive, massive factor that I have discovered in the work that I'm doing is the development of the mind and how it is that we actually express ourselves throughout our lives. And I put the puzzle pieces together over, I guess, about 20 years when I started working as a esthetician, because I started to see how people were expressing themselves in different age frames. So in the formative years, in the very beginning, before we hit our teens, we're literally just a human sponge. So up until we're 8 years old, we actually have no filter to our subconscious mind whatsoever. So everything goes in completely unfiltered and is programming and creating our reality. Now, when we're 8 years old, we actually develop the understanding and the difference between right and wrong. Our critical mind is also developed at that time. Now, the critical mind is actually the bodyguard or the bouncer to the subconscious mind. So now when new ideas and thought processes come in, it actually has to be checked with the critical mind before it's allowed into the subconscious mind or chucked out the window. So the way that that works is when a new idea comes into the mind, it sits in the conscious mind for an hour to an hour and a half. It goes into the critical mind, and then the bouncer or the bodyguard is now able to take a look at it and see whether the idea is congruent or incongruent with your programming. Now, if it's incongruent, it's chucked out the window. If it's congruent, it's allowed in. So that process is happening from age 8 and on. And then we know in our teenage years, we are literally questioning the whole world and we're driven by dopamine. So it's a really good recipe, right? Because we're questioning the universe itself, but we're completely hormonal. So we're really like, we're thinking about big, massive, mature concepts, and at the same time have no maturity whatsoever. And we're wanting to marry every guy that we think is cute and vice versa. It's just out of control, right? So it's just like, I remember being that age, and my mom used to call me Katie Kaboom because I would lose my temper and the whole world would fall apart and everything around me. Just a hurricane would happen every time I was in an emotional state, right? So that state goes on until you're about 21 years old. You're driven by dopamine. So it's all about getting those dopamine hits wherever you can, whatever's fun, right? And then when you hit 21, the logical part of the mind clicks in. Now, it doesn't click in like, and then all of a sudden you're a logical human. And we do know that women generally tend to show more logic behavior when they're a little bit younger, more so than boys. It'll kick in at 21, and it doesn't actually start to really show until they're about 23, maybe. So this is what's really interesting. Now, when you're in your 20s, this is when you actually start to want to put your energy outwards to try to figure out where your tribe is. Where do you fit in the world? And you're still very much seeking that acceptance of the outside world and wanting to know what everybody's doing on a Friday or Saturday night so that you can fit in and find your tribe. Now, you're also trying to figure out where you fit in the world in regards to your vocation and stuff like that as well, right? So everything is outwards. And then when you hit around 30, it's late 20s, 30. This is when the energy then goes inwards and you start to go, hold on a second. These friends are really helpful to me. I don't know if this job is really what I want to do. I want to live. I might actually want a friendectomy and to relocate and to get a whole new career. And you start thinking about what's right for you. This is the stage where we are actually all hitting a fork in the road. This is where we're called to do the work. We start to become introspective, and you've got two directions that you can go. And this is really important with your character development if you're playing with someone in this age range. When you hit the fork in the road, you're going to go one of two ways. You're going to start to expand and be introspective, and you're going to want to start to digest the development stuff and become a better person. Or you say, you know what? I don't want to face the monster in the closet. I'm not doing the work. And you say no, and you go the other way, and you develop a very strong victim mindset. Okay. Now, from my experience, and this is purely my experience, when you hit the fork in the road, if a person says yes, they say yes for the rest of their lives. If a person says no, they say no for the rest of their lives. I have never met a person that has hit the fork in the road and gone one way and then changed their mind. This is just in my experience. If you've experienced something different, that's super cool. But it's something that's really interesting to note. No, so in your 30s, you're called to do the work. Now, if you go a solid decade between 30 and 40, and you have said yes, and you've done the work, what's really beautiful about this is that who you are on the inside in your 40s becomes your exterior. So I've noticed in our 30s, the physical damage that we've done to ourselves, the sun exposure and consumption of substances and stuff like that, that starts to show on our bodies. When we're in our 40, our internal self, who we truly are as a person, starts to show on our exterior, which is really, really phenomenal. So when you're thinking about this and you've got a character that's of a certain age, that's going to help influence that. And we also know that in our 40s, women become significantly more unapologetically who they are. And they start to speak their truths a lot more fiercely. And they start to become a lot more unapologetically serving themselves and their families and their own agendas. right? And then as you get older, the mind becomes more and more rigid. So we become more and more set in our ways, and it becomes more and more difficult to be malleable and to have fluidity and to have a person change their mind or move or be able to handle massive, massive shifts. So when you're thinking about your character development, think about the evolution of the mind and how it is that we express ourselves in the world and where we are in those different ages, and it'll help to support you.
That's really interesting, because obviously, as in real life, an individual or a character is not in a vacuum. They have parents, they have siblings, they have friends. And so you have a huge range of ages as your cast of characters. So this is really an important thing to understand. You know, in historical, a lot of the times the hero has a father who's very rigid and expects his son to be exactly the way he wants him to be. And of course, the son isn't. And he's falling in love with some woman who's totally inappropriate. You know, so that's really good, because that helps to be able to say, this makes sense as the cast of characters. These would be characteristics for this person, and these would be characteristics for that person. And it's also, for me, I think, very helpful to know, well, if you have a character who lost a mother very early in life, that's going to very definitely influence the kind of person you want to create. You know, maybe it's somebody who doesn't relate to women at all, or maybe it's somebody who like wants every woman to be his. I don't know, but I can see that knowing the background of your character is going to be huge in what kind of a character he is. Or if you know what kind of a character you want, it helps to create that backstory for the character.
Yeah, and to speak to what you said about the rigidity, it's really interesting because rigidity can be perceived as something that is attached to somebody who is more mature in years. However, if you have a phys that's older, and the rigidity is as a result of programs that are telling them that the world isn't safe, and so they're controlling to try to control everything because they don't feel safe, and the rigidity isn't age, and say they have a wake-up call and they decide to work with somebody and they decide to get support and they decide to do the work, that rigidity can actually be completely flipped. And they can become somebody who's completely open and completely loving and completely free and fluid, because they let go of the programs that are telling them that the world isn't safe, and they've learned how to exist in the world in such a way that they actually can freely express their love and be more fluid. And that would be a super cool character story.
Oh, it would be. Yes, I could see that would, yeah, great scenario. Great scenario. Okay.
Just something to play with, because those dynamics, when you understand how the mind works, can really, really be played with. If any of you guys have any questions for me based on what I've discussed or anything that's popping to your mind, please ask me. I'd love to support you.
Okay, so everybody needs to unmute themselves. MJ, Erica, Nikki, Mary, somebody's got to have some questions for Harmony, because I mean, you went into some really deep stuff that it will take me a little bit to kind of process it. I'll probably watch this 2 or 3 times and then take notes to try and figure some of this out. Yes, MJ.
You lost me in the input and the output. I didn't understand that, whatever that was, that comment.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. That's great. I'm happy to explain that a little bit more. So when I'm talking about input and output, I'm talking about how the mind receives information versus how it is that it outputs information, or how we express ourselves, right? So when we think about a physical, their input or how they receive information. So if we were to have a conversation and you were to tell me something, being a phys, I would input or receive the information that you're giving me literally, right? So if you were to say to me, you're like a fish, you swim so incredibly well, I'd stand up and be like, I don't have gills. I have no idea what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Because I would receive it literally. And that's an actual example of a child that I did that with. And he actually stood up and was like, I'm not a fish. I don't have gills. So the emo is quite the opposite. And the way that they would receive information in a conversation would be through inference. So they would infer everything that I say. So if I was to say to an emo, you're like a fish, you know, you swim so well, they'd be like, yeah, I totally am. I'm an amazing swimmer. Because they would infer that I mean that they're a good swimmer, not that I'm calling them a fish. So the output is our sexuality. And that is basically how we behave in the world, how we communicate with others, how we present ourselves. So physicals, generally their output is a lot more bold. They're a lot more showy. They definitely love to put on really showy outfits. When they're picking out their outfits, they're usually asking themselves, what's going to get me noticed? They're not afraid of color. They love the glitter and the sequins and stuff. They show up in the room and they want to be the one who's the center of attention in the room. So the output is a lot greater. They're a lot more social. They're a lot more extroverted. Whereas the emo is going to be quite the opposite. And they're going to be more of a wallflower. They're going to be significantly happier if they only connect with one person. And it's going to be kind of off to the side, having a really intense, in-depth conversation. And they'll walk away from that one connection feeling completely fulfilled. And that's literally all they need. They're going to be a lot more chill in the way that they dress. They're not necessarily dressing to be showy. In fact, a lot of the time they're like glitter and sequins are too gaudy. So their outward expression is going to be a lot more subdued.
So
go ahead.
If somebody is the emo, the subdued person, and they meet the right person, can they actually change? Or is that symbolist or whatever you called it, that's in the middle?
Somnambulist. That's actually, I'm really, really glad that you brought that up, because that is something to really make a note of, is that the emo, when they first meet somebody that they're interested in, they become more physical in their behavior. They become more extroverted. They become more charismatic. They talk a lot more. They'll go outside of their comfort zone to mix and mingle if it means they're going to be able to get what they're looking for. And in the rose-colored glasses phase of the relationship, they're going to go way outside of their comfort zone and be and do things that they typically wouldn't do, so that they can lock down the fizz. And this is purely subconscious behavior. They don't know they're doing it, right? And then when they get comfortable in the relationship, they revert back to their emo ways. And what happens is the fizz goes, you're not who I met. This isn't fair. Why do you play games all the time? Why you me? Why aren't you? It's because they weren't actually being their true selves when they were getting to know you. So it's really fascinating when you look at that. The emo does actually become a lot more extroverted, and then they settle back into who they are once they've locked the relationship down. Whereas the fizz is always just being a fizz. They're just always being outward. And another thing that's really interesting to note is a female fizz gets along better with and is more drawn to males for friends. And the male fizz is more drawn to other male fizzes. A fizz or an emo female actually prefers to hang out with other women and go out and tease the boys. An emo male doesn't need anyone but their partner. They actually don't care if they have any friends. They just want to hang out with their lover, and they literally just want them to be their everything. And they want their lover to actually give them friends whenever they want somebody to hang out with. They won't go out and make their own. It's really funny. Mine's like that. He's like, can you give me some friends to hang out with? I'm like, what? Go get your own. Why do you do this for? So when you understand that dynamic, that will actually help you to dictate essentially how your character is socializing and what their preference is.
Huh. Okay. Thank you for answering that. I have one more question. Can someone be both a fizz and an emo?
So they could be a fizz suggestible and an emotional sexual. So their input could be physical and their output could be sexual. So yes, you can be both. but you couldn't be a physical suggestible and an emo suggestible. That wouldn't make sense.
Okay, what's a suggestible again? Sorry.
So suggestible is how you receive information. Sexual is your output and how you express yourself.
Okay, so I have two characters who fall in love in my story, a novel, and one is a very outgoing and very showy, like you were saying, bold and showy, and so that's a fizz, obviously, right?
Yes.
And the other one is very on the inside, right? More on the inside, but very spiritual, astrological, and sort of, but not sometimes a wallflower type, but she switches, right? She switches. And if she sees that the person she likes, the fizz, is, just really out there being bold and stuff, she can step in and also be very showy and bold. But it's not true to her nature.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. My partner, when we go out and we socialize together, he's actually a magician. So he brings his cards and he does magic for people. And when he's out socializing and stuff like that, he absolutely can match me and show that outgoing personality. But on the norm, he's happier just being in his workshop, being by himself, being in his own world. So that makes perfect sense.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Harmony.
Yeah, you got it, my dear. Anyone else have any questions?
I don't know. Nikki's unmuted, so I was wondering if you had a question, Nikki. Okay, so there might not be any questions. You said that you were going to put something in the chat. Is that correct?
Yes.
Links in the chat.
If anyone has any questions in the meantime, please feel free to hit me up and I will let you know. Now, I know that she mentioned that I became a best-selling author really quickly after publishing a book of mine. That book is called Create a Healthy Romantic Relationship. So those of you who are romance writers, this would be a really good book for you to get and read, because I do very much talk about the different dynamics. I talk about suggestibility. I talk about the framework that you need in order to be able to create a very healthy foundation for a relationship. And if you want to write a scenario where maybe there was a lot of dysfunction and then the characters actually go through a path to work together and to sort things out and to create a beautiful relationship with each other, this would actually give you a really great framework to map that out. So I'm going to share the link to that book. And then the other thing that I'm going to share to your guys' benefit so that you can do the suggestibility testing. And you can also go through and watch the videos and stuff that explain the suggestibility testing in more detail. There is an amazing resources section in the book that I'm giving you guys that typically you would only get if you actually bought the book, but I'm going to hand this to you guys so that you can go through this, and it's going to give you that information so that you can really understand what it is that I'm talking to you about, suggestibility and sexuality in much more fine detail. And the videos are on YouTube, which is really great. So when you're actually in the frame of mind where you're developing these characters and you're like, I can't remember the priority list of a fizz versus the emo. Was it the emo that had love as a top priority, or I can't remember. You can go back and you can visit these videos and remind yourself as you're developing those characters to support yourself. So that'll be there for you whenever you want to visit it. So the link for the book is there, and the link for the resources page is there for you guys to access.
Okay, that's great. When I post the replays in the Facebook group, I will post these links also.
Oh, look at that. Nikki put her hand up.
Oh, okay.
There's no links in the chat.
Yeah, I just copied them.
Wait. I direct messaged you, Paula. That's my fault.
Oh.
Sorry, guys.
No,
I should have made them public and I didn't.
Okay. Okay. Let me. I had it copied, so there it is, right there to everyone.
Perfect. Thank
Do you see it now?
Yes, I can see it. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm glad that pointed that out. So
That's
thank
the first
you,
one. And
Harmony.
then there's another one as well. And for some reason, I can only direct message you. So can you copy and paste the second one as well, please?
Okay, hold on a second.
I don't know why.
That might be some of the settings that I have. Okay, so I
I can only talk to Paula.
Okay, so do I have it all here now? Oh, is it all there now? There's two.
Yeah, they're just looking like one. I hope that's not confusing.
Okay, so okay. The nice thing is I can do this over and over and over again.
Perfect.
Okay, here's the first one. And then
There
I'll
we
come
go.
back up here and find the second one. So
Nikki, you put your hand up. Did you have a question? Or did you just put your
Yes,
hand up
I
by
did.
accident?
No, I didn't see
good.
it by accident. I'm here now. I thought I was on mute earlier. I apologize. I had a minor medical procedure done this morning, and my mom came in the room to give me some instructions for before bed. And I thought I was on mute, and I'm like, oh, nobody can hear you. And then my mic wasn't muted. And I was like, on second thought, everybody can hear you. So sorry about that. Doing better.
Oh, no
But
worries.
my mind is a little foggy, so I'm trying to think of how to best phrase my question. Plus, for those who don't know me, I have autism, so that always makes things a little foggier.
Super fun.
Oh, yeah. So I'm wondering, as an autistic author, one of my major fears in creating fictional characters is to accidentally infect my neurotypical characters, meaning my non-autistic characters, with my autism, because it's a part of me. It's how I do my decision making, how I have my priority list. And sometimes I get really, bad, I guess for lack of a better term, we'll say writer's block, because it's like I'm writing in this point of view of this character who doesn't have autism. And people always say, oh, write more characters that have autism. But if I've got, not a dual point romance novel or dual POV romance novel, if I've got more of an ensemble piece where I've got like 10 characters, not all of them can have autism or should have autism. And I wonder, how does the emo and fizz apply to autistics or not apply, or would apply to somebody? I write a lot of, neurodivergent, disabled, inclusive, like, characters who are developmentally delayed. I also am primarily sci-fi. So I write a lot of alien races. So again, the cognitive thinking might be different. Or people, I brought this up in another writer group, people who were maybe held prisoner by aliens, so kind of like raised as lab experience, like in a lab. So you have someone who would who would be chronically, let's say 34 years old, but who didn't have the typical milestones of, like, say, prom or first date or, college education, because they were essentially growing up in a lab held by aliens. Yeah, I'm that kind of person.
Cool.
So-
I love it. That sounds like
I-
an epic adventure.
I have a lot of stories where it's almost like it's a group of people, actually. Usually how I explain it is like, kind of think of like the Jedi Knights kind of, and they're kind of reverse human traffickers. They go into like these alien situations and basically set people free and smuggle them not into slavery, but sort of a smuggling out. It's like the inverse of a human trafficker. So
Yeah.
It's really cool. But, I wonder how this applies to characters with developmental delays, or characters who have had milestones withheld because they were, in some cases, for lack of a better term, literally held prisoner and not allowed to have, some of this mother figure, father figure interaction. So that's where I'm coming from anyway, my point of
I
view.
love
I'm
it.
gonna
I love it.
totally
I love
throw a
what you're
monkey wrench.
doing. And I'm just gonna say, if you're going sci-fi and stuff like that, can you please be the first sci-fi writer that actually honors the fact that it's very possible in the future that we could be expressing romance in different ways other than monogamy? Because apparently that's the only thing that ever gets written or told. And I don't understand that, because I think we're going to be a little more evolved in 400 years. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I
Just
don't
wanted to
write
plant that seed with a sci-fi writer,
I
because
don't write
I'm
sci-fi
frustrated.
that's like 400 years in the future. It's mainly
Oh, darn
sci-fi
it.
because it's humans and aliens kind of fighting. Think kind of like Independence Day, but cooler. And
Yeah. I totally
so
respect that. Here's what's really interesting about the dynamic is that I think that a lot of people generally tend to think that somebody who has some type of neurodivergence or disability or something is someone who would just receive everything literally, because they don't understand sarcasm or they don't understand subtleties, and they are hindered as a result of that. But it's actually a phys trait, right? So
oh,
how would that play out if you're dealing with somebody that is neurodivergent and a phys, right?
you know what's
Or
funny
if
with that too is like I usually get told, and this is other people's opinions of me. I have a very low opinion of myself, but people usually tell me, like, even among the high functioning autistics, I'm high functioning. I'm like, I guess 90% neurotypical and 10% autistic, and just to put a number on it, or like,
yeah,
90% of the time I could pass for neurotypical, and then there's 10% that's bad, and the autism rears its ugly head. I have been told again that autistics can't be sarcastic. They have no grasp of sarcasm. And then I'm told by, neurotypical peers that I'm like personally sarcastic every other word. And like legit, and like sometimes I'm just speaking like I am now, and I don't realize I'm saying something to be funny or whatever, and I realize the commentary I'm making on another person is I'm saying it in a way that is funny, but I don't personally identify as, oh, I'm being sarcastic in this moment. Sometimes I realize it, yeah, that's sarcasm, or there I go with the sarcasm again. But a lot of times to me it's expressing a point of view, usually a not so flattering opinion of another person, and it's in this non-flattering light that I'm kind of think I'm being a little more literal, but it's like expressed sarcastically to others. And I had one boss in particular on a prior job that used to tell me all the time, you're being sarcastic and it's not a good look on you, you're being sarcastic. And I went to like the other bosses and was like, like snapping an elastic on your wrist or something, I'm like, can you just tell me, like, so I can know examples of that was a sarcastic thing to say, or that was a sarcastic comment, or a sarcastic appraisal of a person. I just want to get a better grasp, because supposedly I'm a very sarcastic person.
that's really funny. Now,
I
how
have
would the world
no,
be? Now, do the people that you work with in that scenario, did they know that you had autism going
yes,
on?
yes,
Okay, so
I disclose.
that purely influences the way people see you, right? If they know
Yeah,
that you have that going on, they're going to attribute what they would consider to be neurodivergence as your autism showing. Whereas if they didn't know it at all, they would just be like, oh, she's a sarcastic person. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't
yeah,
attribute it to that. So that's something that's really interesting to look at. And when you understand your suggestibility and sexuality a little bit better, your input output, when you do the testing and you watch it and stuff, it'll actually be really cool to see how that helps influence the way that you see things. And it might create a whole new world for you when it comes to your character development, especially being somebody who is a little bit neurodivergent. And it would be fun to play with scenarios where, say, a character that does have something going on goes into scenarios where they are perceived one way by people that don't know what's going on with them, and they're perceived in another way that by people that do know what's going on, and the prejudice that goes on when people actually are aware of, or told that a person has something going on, right?
Oh, it's amazing. Like I worked at Bath and Body Works and I actually had a manager who I had disclosed to her. She actually recruited me off the street. I was shopping there years ago and was like, "Hey, you want to come work with us?" And I immediately disclosed I'm autistic. I don't know that I would be considered, and disclosed at my interview. And same manager worked with me for over 2 years that I was employed there. And all of a sudden just decided like, I need you to leave, and started making trouble for me with corporate. And I had our corporate office out of the state of Ohio, which is not the state I live in, calling me and basically asking for doctor notes to verify that I had autism. And I ended up being dismissed from my job, being told that the symptoms of my disability did not align with Bath and Body Works company values. And so I would be permanently separated from my employment after working there for over 2 years, after disclosing to every manager and almost, I think, every employee as well. I'm very scared of people not knowing what is different about me. And then a lot of times I've accidentally offended people, not realizing, well, neurotypical people don't say that. And so rather than have that confusion, hey, what's wrong with that person? Typically when I meet somebody, especially in a vocational environment, oh, hey, you're the new hire. I'm Nikki and I have autism. I typically put that out there just so that people know, so that they have that buffer. And, it's not that I was trying to hide it. I definitely was not trying to hide it from corporate. And it just amazes me the prejudice, that's still out there, and how far we've come
Yes.
in the inclusion debate and how much further we have to go. So when you said, it's weird to me that people who knew me for 2 years and knew about my diagnosis for 2 years would then have that. It just triggered that when you said about the prejudice and everything
I
in the
totally
workplace.
respect that. And being a student of the mind and functioning the way that I do and understanding the mind, you can tell me that, but in my mind, I'm going to see you as a whole being, and this being something that makes you brilliant, as opposed to it being something that makes you like separates you. Like I can very much hear in your mind that you're separating people that are considered to be more neurotypically normal as opposed to neurodivergent, being in
Right.
two very separate camps. Whereas Nikki, I'm just going to tell you, you and I are the same. And as far as
Aw.
I'm concerned, you and I are the same. We're both brilliant minds and we're both doing really cool stuff. And whatever it is that is a label that somebody has gone and put on you literally means nothing to me. You're just a powerful divine goddess as far as I'm concerned. And you're doing some damn cool stuff. And I want to read your books now. And I love where your brain is going. And I think it's brilliant. And if anyone who looks at that label sees you in a different way or lacking in any way, I'm just going to say that they deserve the boot of love is what they deserve. Right. I never like to spread hate and anger, but I will give the boot of love when it's needed. And I really don't believe that you need to wear that autism badge on you all the freaking time. It's not something that you should have to tell everyone. I understand that in professional environments, that it should be disclosed and stuff like that. But outside of that, honey, just be the brilliant goddess that you are and kick ass and take names. And you don't need to be telling everyone that, because just talking to you in 5 minutes, I love you. I think you're fantastic. And I could care less whether there's a label attached to you or not. Okay.
That means so much to me, coming from, I also have a background where I was born with a facial deformity that I had to live with for 16 and a half years, that it couldn't be fixed because of the medical technology for 16 and a half years. It's not that they didn't want to get it fixed. It was the treatment plan because of bone growth reasons. And I live to this day with the psychological scars from having to deal. I think the older I got before the surgery, the worse I looked. And thankfully, I got the surgery 27 years ago when I was 16 and a half. And it's just, I was undiagnosed autistic until I was 26. So 10 years after that surgery, I got my autism diagnosis. And it's been a lot of hard labels to deal with, and a lot of, I can be a very personable person at work. I work at another store for now, where I'm very loved and I love, interacting with the customers. But there's a level of social phobia because of how I've been mistreated by other people and how I've been bullied. And first it was for the facial deformity and, undiagnosed autism. And then even when I disclose the autism, it seems like it still doesn't work in my favor with all people all the time, of course. And so just to hear that from you, and I can't wait to get my books out to you. I hope you love them.
Oh my gosh, that's so incredible. I love it so much. And I think one of the things that I could say to you, if I could say anything, because really it is my job in this life to flood this earth with love. And that means waking up everyone that I work with to their own brilliance and helping them to love themselves, is I would ask you and implore you to ask yourself what awareness has been created as a result of the path that you've walked. Because you are the beautiful soul that you are as a result of everything that you've experienced. I'm sure you wouldn't hurt a fly because of the pain that you've endured. And it probably informs the stories that you tell as a result,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. So bathe in the beauty that you have curated as a result of the pain that you've experienced, and celebrate that as opposed to being in the past, living in the hardship. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. And use that to show up in the world with love for others. And if anyone does anything that's undesirable, honey, I'm just going to let you know right now, it never has anything to do with you. We're really self-involved and we like to think it has something to do with us, but it actually doesn't. It has everything to do with them and the world they've created and their own programming and their own hardships. And I'm telling you, when somebody does something undesirable, they're only undressing themselves and showing their programming. They're not undressing you unless you let them.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me,
You're
Harmony.
welcome, love.
Excuse me, Harmony. MJ pointed out that the second link that you put in the thing just takes us to ClickFunnels. It doesn't actually take us to anything. I think
it should be taking you to the actual funnel. Hold on just a second.
No, it takes us to your ClickFunnels login.
What? Okay, hold on. Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to quickly put it in an incognito window and test it and make sure that it works. Okay. Okay, I must have sent you the wrong link because I just went and tested it and it's working just fine. Okay, can you test that and let me know if it works okay? Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is a different link. Yeah. Hold on.
Perfect.
Let me test it.
Yeah, so that link has a pretty picture of me chilling on a chair. And then you've got the 30-day self-love challenge. That's a free downloadable that you can use to reprogram your mind in as little as 5 minutes a night before you go to sleep for self-love. The suggestibility testing is there, your scoring instructions. Then the EMP, emotional and physical, who you are in relationships, part 1 and 2. That's your videos to watch to learn more. My website is there. The map of consciousness is there. That might be something you want to explain to your people. Create the link to create a healthy romantic relationship workbook is there, and then my other books are in there. So there's lots of goodies for you guys.
Okay. Yeah, so I just put that in for everybody. It is great.
Beautiful.
I'm going to be looking at them this afternoon or this evening or whatever time it is. So,
and if you guys have any questions and you want to connect with you, I'll make sure that Paula's connected with whatever information so that you guys can reach out to me as well. And if you want to converse with me further, I'll make sure that I give her the link to a soul connection. Actually, I think it's actually even in there. You can book a free call with me so you can have a one-on-one chat with me as well.
Yeah, and Harmony is in the Romance Dream Weavers group. So if you need to PM her personally, go to the members, put in her name, she'll pop up, and then you can send her a private message.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook posting all the time and promoting myself and stuff. So I will definitely get the notification if you actually tag me.
Yeah. So Harmony, I thank you so very much for sharing this information. I found it fascinating. I'm sure that it will definitely influence my character development, and I would hope that everybody else finds it as fascinating as I did. And I thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I'm intending to post the replay tomorrow. It depends on how well my internet connection is, but if nothing else, I will be able to, as soon as I get it uploaded to YouTube, be able to let everybody know what the YouTube link is. So, and I will be sending you, Harmony, the link, and you can use that however you want to.
Amazing. It was a pleasure to educate you guys, and I look forward to hearing about how you guys are doing when you watch the videos and get to know this. And please do in the Facebook chat, post your suggestibility once you've gone through the testing so that I know what you guys are, because it's fun.
Oh, all right. Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I guess that's it, unless there are any other questions. Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.